There's something truly astonishing and weird about the US view of what's happening in Hong Kong. As you can see in this photo, there's a bunch of Hong Kong protesters waving American flags. They carry signs asking for Trump to help liberate Hong Kong. And they are fighting against police, and this is being reinforced by the Communist Party of China. So in a sense, you have pro-democracy protesters pushing back on China, all at a time while Trump is escalating the US trade war with China. So it's no surprise then that I'm seeing far-left activists and media personalities condemn the Hong Kong protesters as far-right, as fascists, as violent mobs. The other day, we saw police in Hong Kong draw their guns on protesters with sticks. Now listen, I'll be the first to condemn mob violence. I will do it here in the US and I will call it out in Hong Kong. I don't care where it is. There have been circumstances where Hong Kong protesters have beaten a journalist because I thought he was a cop. And that is absolutely detestable, deplorable, and wrong, and needs to be condemned outright. Then there are more complicated situations where a group of cops are fighting with a mob, and then it goes back and forth with the cops drawing their guns. At that point, I kind of say it's escalated beyond my own perspective on the matter. If two groups are fighting with each other and then someone draws a gun, I think they probably shouldn't do that. But at the same time, there's no real, position for me to say, who's right or who's wrong in a fight of this proportion. When the police and the protesters are fighting with each other to an extreme degree, when the protesters are demanding something and they're being repressed with weapons, well, it escalates to a point where I can't tell you what is or isn't the right side to be on, except for the general principle. The point I'm trying to make is both sides should not be engaging in violence. The police should not have been beating and grabbing protesters, and the protesters should not be beating and chasing cops with sticks. What do you do at this point? I honestly don't know. That's a conflict. That's, escalating to civil unrest, potential civil war. And at that point, who are you going to blame? Who started? I don't know. Who's worse, the guy with the sticks or the guy with the guns? Can't tell you. What I can say is the protesters have a right to peacefully protest, which they have done in the past. 1.7 million people coming out in the streets. The protesters have a right to demand democracy. They have a right to be heard. They have a right to self-expression. And the Chinese government should not be coming in with massive police forces and brutalizing them. The same is true for the US. If a bunch of protesters, be it Occupy Wall Street or Black Lives Matter, whoever else, wants to go out and march peacefully, I'm totally on board with it. What we see in the US, however, is Antifa showing up to a peaceful American rally and instigating violence, for the most part. There's certainly some blame to go around with some right-wing groups. They've been charged, but typically, you will see a right-wing group in the US march around with American flags and be attacked by communists. What do we end up seeing in Hong Kong? American flag waving Hong Kongers being attacked by the pro-communists. So while there's an inversion of the power structure, what it seems like we're actually seeing is actually a mirror image. The anti-fascists in the US, for the most part, are waving communist flags. Not all of them, but some of them. And then they're going up to the guys with American flags and they're fighting them. Eventually, the guys with the American flags fight back with sticks, like Based Stickman. And this is what you get in response. So in this capacity, I will say the police absolutely are in the wrong. You can't start a conflict, water cannons, tear gas, especially when the protesters have been as peaceful as they've been, and then, draw a gun on them because this is your escalation. You know what? I said the same thing about the Proud Boys getting in a fight in New York, saying don't escalate it. If they're going to attack you, defend yourself. But what happened then? The Proud Boys ended up getting charged. So let me show you this. First, you can see the photo. Hong Kong police draw guns in latest protest violence. But I'm sure you're wondering, what is the more far-left pro-communist activist response? First, we have this. Now, we have a tweet here from this man, Austin Ramsey, who I believe he's a New York Times reporter in Hong Kong, saying, amazing and terrifying photo by Lam Yik Fei of the gun incident tonight. Frightened just looking at this. They drew their guns, more than one cop, and according to one video, it appears they may have fired a warning shot. Ben Norton, who I will stress I do have many agreements with. We've both been, accused of, ridiculous slander by the SPLC. So I disagree with him on this, but I will give him that respect. I disagree with him. He says, this New York Times stenographer in Hong Kong, of course, left out the context behind the photo of the police officer pulling out his gun. Mobs of violent far-right rioters brutally attacking the police. This dishonest propaganda is rewarded in the corporate media. You know what I find so fascinating about this is that you now have someone who's more aligned with far left politics defending the police because a mob came after them. It is rather inverted because in the US, you'll see Antifa fighting with cops and the right condemning Antifa fighting with the cops. How does this flip happen? How are they defending the police in this circumstance? Well, Austin Ramsey said, "Did you read the story? It's in the first line." To which Ben Norton says, "Protesters who are charging them with sticks is totally ridiculous and simply inaccurate euphemism for a giant, overwhelming mob of far-right violent nationalists actively hitting them with bats, metal bars, and rods, and blocks of wood, and clad in helmets and body armor." Interesting. So the police are in the right when they happen to be in favor of communism? This is where I believe principle starts to break down for any tribe. Certainly, you would expect those who claim to be anti-authoritarian condemning the actions of the police. I'll stress the point I made just a moment ago because it is rather confusing. When you enter the fray at a certain point and just see two groups fighting, it's hard to know who's right and who's wrong. But I will stress, if a guy's got a stick and you got a gun, I'm going to ask that you don't escalate things. Now, you can argue the police have every right to draw their weapon on a mob of, who's swinging their bats, and it did effectively de-escalate the situation. But I'm anti-authoritarian. I don't care if you're a communist or a cop in the US, you shouldn't be drawing a gun with live ammo on these groups. And this is the fault of the establishment in Hong Kong and the mainland Chinese. It's their fault for this escalation in the long run. That's what I think. Look, people have a right to protest. Left, right, top, down, whatever your alignment is, whoever you are, you have a right to express yourself. We're now seeing an escalation in conflict that I think is wrong. But Ben goes on to say, there are literal fascists in the Hong Kong Gorimbas. They are the anti-China ones meeting with US diplomats, waving US-UK flags, singing the US anthem, torturing mainland journos, and using Pepe symbols, and attracting US white supremacists like Patriot Prayer. And there it is. Well, we can certainly see that Ian Miles Chong said you should have been bullied harder as a child. I completely disagree with that, but here it is. You may be wondering about the Patriot Prayer and the flags and singing the national anthem. In this photo, we can see they're holding up signs saying, "President Trump, please liberate Hong Kong." Look at this big sign. "Please pass the bill," etc. These are people in Hong Kong protesting, 1.7 million people who appreciate democracy and freedom. But let me show you something interesting. Somebody posted this on Facebook in response, someone I actually know, in response to one of my videos. Tim Pool backs the Hong Kong protests, so now I'm skeptical of them. Really? That makes me wonder, do you care about resisting authoritarianism and supporting the people demanding a redress of grievances? Or is it about tribalism? Simply, they're saying Tim Pool doesn't like communist authoritarians who are beating people in the street. Therefore, I must not support the little guy. He's going to back the communists. Well, there's more. Check this out. He additionally posted, "Okay, Twitter and Facebook are actually working to promote and help organize Hong Kong demo. I can't back the protests anymore." And there it is. It doesn't matter what they're fighting for. It doesn't matter that the people in Hong Kong are resisting the authoritarianism of the Chinese government. It's a very complicated situation. My general understanding, which is probably more so incorrect, is that, for the longest time, Hong Kong was a colony. It's a special economic zone. It functions very differently from China, but over the past 20 or so years, China has they regained control of it and have been increasingly trying to gain more control over how the administration is run in Hong Kong. Eventually, the people there say, they have a different culture, they believe in something else, and they resist. They want freedom. So they wave their American flags. And in response, we can see the police, acting at the behest more so of mainland China, go out and start beating people with sticks. Now, it's true. I will stress. Ben Norton says they tortured journalists. Well, I don't know about, I can't answer to that. That sounds ridiculous, but I can say there have been instances where a journalist was detained and roughed up a little bit. I don't want to say tortured, but they beat him up because they found business cards for cops. Why? Well, as a journalist, of course, is going to have that. And I condemned it outright. I'll condemn it when Antifa does it. I'll condemn it when those in Hong Kong do it. I'll condemn it when Patriot Prayer or anybody else does it. It's wrong. You shouldn't be instigating violence, especially against journalists. The mob needs to simmer down. People get all agitated and start attacking random people, and it's not a good thing. And Antifa does that, we'll call them out. The difference is Antifa in the US is attacking American citizens who are minding their own business. If a group like the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayers wants to go wave their little American flags, okay, fine, you're allowed to. When communists then come out literally waving communist flags, like you can see here, this is a shot from Portland just in the past week or so at that rally, and this is from Subverse. I can verify this, it happened. Somebody waving a communist flag. We can see that it's not about principles, it's about tribe. Why are people on the far left defending communist China? Because they're communists. They're defending the police. How is it that a group that normally aligns, I don't want to say everybody, but they're the ones who say ACAB, right? That means all cops are, and then B word. The word, I'm avoiding swearing, but the word for when you don't have married parents, right? How is it that group now is defending the police? If a group of Antifa charged the cops in the US with sticks and batons, these same people would be saying, yay, they're fighting fascism. And they accuse the Hong Kong people of being fascist. Well, something really fascinating has been happening. Something truly fascinating. Check this out. From The Verge, Pepe the Frog, an unlikely ally of Hong Kong protesters at the world's largest gaming tournament. I've got more stories about this. But yes, the Hong Kong protesters are using Pepe, the frog that Hillary Clinton denounced so loudly, that's been aligned with the fringe far right. But now we have American flag waving, US national anthem singing, Pepe the Frog painting protesters. And it's very confusing when you have these people resisting the authoritarian system of China and the media doesn't know how to respond. They're trying to say, wait, maybe they're reclaiming Pepe because it was a hate symbol. No. Perhaps you lied about what Pepe really was in the first place, and Pepe doesn't mean much of anything. It's just a meme used as a character online that's sometimes happy, sometimes sad, sometimes it's a bigot, sometimes it isn't. If you go on Reddit, you will sometimes see posts that have nothing to do with politics. It's like almost every day, the green text whatever subreddit. And there's like one post where someone talks about how his mom made him chicken tenders and worked really hard and helped him, grow up to be successful. And it's a picture of, I think it's called Helper. It's a deviation. It's like a spin-off of Pepe, basically Pepe. And like people use the meme to mean different things. So everybody uses it. The problem is the left in our country doesn't seem to have the ability. I shouldn't say like all of the left, but there's a section of the left, and it's large and growing, that doesn't understand general research and can't think critically. I think this is why they don't understand humor, they don't get jokes, and they see something like Pepe and shriek, ah! So now it's really confusing for them that Pepe is popping up all over Hong Kong. And that's probably why we're seeing so many people say that that the Hong Kong protesters are fascists. They can't differentiate. They can't understand the true meme behind Pepe. Interestingly, they mention how this guy, Lacoste, was wearing a Pepe pin at this gaming tournament, and they ask whether or not he was doing it to support the Hong Kong protesters. Or maybe it's because Pepe is a meme and a lot of people wear it. In fact, in Portland, there was a guy wearing a Pepe meme button who was they silly stringed his face and started running after him and throwing eggs at him. Isn't it weird that it's more likely to be communist aligned people attacking the guy with the Pepe badge, and that's the same thing happening in Hong Kong. Well, this guy ended up removing the badge later on. I think they show it. I'm not sure. Yeah, he ended up changing the pin to something else after a break or something. I don't know why, but they're acting like they're acting like this is a reclaiming of Pepe, when in reality it's Pepe as Pepe was intended to be. Now check this out. Wired, very confused. Pepe the Frog means something different in Hong Kong, right? Well, that's what they're trying to claim, but in reality, Pepe is it's whatever you make him to be. Check this out. You got to see this. A very online American, but not alt-right, if you're a very online American, but not alt-right, finding a Pepe the Frog meme in a comment section feels like finding a Klan hood in the back of someone's closet. What? Apparently these people have never been on Reddit before. That's insane. It's objectively goofy looking and the people associated with it have been banished by polite society? Where are you from? What world do you live in? These writers live atop an ivory tower and they don't interact with the commoners. But the symbol is so saturated with hate and rage and fear that just the sight of it is a shock. Standards change, however, as you move about the globe. No, it doesn't. It means the same thing to people online. There are people at gaming tournaments holding up Pepe memes. They were making the OK sign. It doesn't mean what you think it means. I think these people have no sense of humor and can't think critically. So when someone uses something ironically, they can't tell the difference. They have no concept of irony. Perhaps it has to do with going to college and being institutionalized for 22 years. Or, 18. They say, in Spain, pointed white hoods are an uncontroversial feature of Easter celebrations. In Hong Kong, Pepe the Frog is now a symbol of progressive resistance against an authoritarian state. It's really confusing now, isn't it? Look, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. Wired is saying that Pepe is a progressive resistance, is a symbol of progressive resistance. Meanwhile, other far left personalities in the US are saying they're fascists. And they're supported by, listen, they're asking for Trump's help, okay? I'm not going to align these people with progressives. They're asking for the help of Donald Trump. You know what I thought of when I saw this? They're trying to justify why Pepe is being used. And my only question is, when you see someone say something like this, Tim Pool backs the Hong Kong protests, and now I'm skeptical of them. It reminds me of that skit where the two guys ask themselves, are we the baddies? Perhaps you need to ask yourself that. When those standing up to authoritarianism are waving American flags, singing our anthem, and asking Trump for help, maybe you should ask yourself if you are the baddies. And then take a look at the flag that you're waving. And take a look at the flag waved by those who are beating the protesters and resisting democracy. Perhaps you're waving the same symbol as them. Look, every group needs to reflect on themselves and recognize that no one's perfect. The American flag has been waved in places where bad things have happened for sure. But how can you simultaneously act like Pepe the Frog is a progressive symbol, but then also claim it's like finding a Klan hood? How can the same symbol mean so dramatically different things in the wake of protest? Perhaps it's because you're the baddies. When you claim that these protesters are far-right fascists, another outlet claims they're progressive, but in the end, you really live in this world. Perhaps you're the baddies. The question is, why is Hong Kong protesting? Here is a story talking about their 5 demands. So I think, I'll dive into this a little bit, just to give you the true context, and then you can decide for yourself. Hong Kong belongs to China, CNN reports, but it has its own currency, political system, and cultural identity. Many Hong Kong residents don't see themselves as Chinese, but rather as Hong Kongers. That difference goes back generations. The city was a colony and territory of the UK for more than 150 years, until the British handed it back over in 1997. Today, Hong Kong's legal system still mirrors the British model, prizing transparency and due process. The policy, dubbed One Country, Two Systems, enshrines this uniqueness. Under the policy, Hong Kong maintains a de facto constitution known as the Hong Kong Basic Law. It guarantees freedoms that are unavailable to Chinese mainlanders, such as the right to protest, the right to a free press, and freedom of speech. One of the most important tenets of the protest, freedom of speech. So why do they wave the American flag? Why do they paint Pepes? Because they're protesting for basically the same thing as many people in this country are in the United States. Free speech. And it's natural. It's no surprise then that they will be called fascists. Fascists and white supremacists. Seriously. They say, the basic law states that Hong Kong shall safeguard the rights and freedoms of the residents for 50 years after the handover. But many residents say mainland China is already starting to encroach on those rights. And that makes sense. Now, I think it was wrong for protesters to ransack buildings, to engage in violence, and it's wrong if they did it in the US too, and it's wrong when Antifa does it. But you have to know that what we're talking about here is the principles of free expression, which more so mirrors the United States right than it does the left. All you have is an inversion of power. I truly believe if in the US we had a communist government, you would see the right wing doing the same thing. I think within reason, it is wrong. Now, however, I've stated this in the past. For me, for the most part, I recognize the importance of principle, and I also recognize that when a system becomes tyrannical, then resistance is important. The problem, however, for the US is that you have people showing up and beating citizens. In Hong Kong, there have been some instances of violence against citizens, like journalists, and it's wrong. But they're going after a government building. So it is rather different. Still, I would question, who's escalating what and why. But in the end, here's what I think is important. In the US, the right-wing groups are minding their own business and the left attacks them. That's exactly what's happening in Hong Kong. Now you're seeing that escalation. The Hong Kongers are getting more violent and damaging property, and fights are breaking out. They're shutting down airports and things like that. But there's now 2 people who have lost their eyes in Hong Kong. They go to talk about why they're targeting the airport, but I'll say this. I can't tell you too much about Hong Kong. I'm not an expert in Hong Kong culture and what they believe. What I can say is, I don't trust the media in the US for the most part because they're heavily biased. They can't understand basic concepts like Pepe. They're simultaneously trying to claim that Pepe is a symbol of progressive resistance. A group demanding free speech is progressive to you? What world do you live in? They're full of it. They are full of it. And I will say this, we are seeing the far left now turn on the Hong Kong protests, and it's only a matter of time. It is only a matter of time. Look at this. Ben Norton also adds, shady pro-imperialist propagandists like Hong Kong Hermit peddle disinformation and help larger campaigns to break up and destabilize other people's post-colonial countries, are on the side of literal fascists who call mainland Chinese locusts. What a weird world we live in. I can't really tell you what to believe, but there's some truly unhinged people, and nothing seems to make sense. But I will say this, based on what we see from Wired, it shows me that they don't care about principles. They don't care about truth. They care about tribe. Is their tribe winning? Yes. Well, then they're good. Is their tribe losing? Well, then their principles will flip on a dime. And now we see people on the left defending the police. Wow. What a weird world. I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. Stick around. Next segment will be coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. And I'll see you all then.